All right, in this lesson, we're going to be talking about variables. It's going to be very important for you to know what variables are, how to create them, and how to assign values to variables inside of your programming language. Now, a variable, what is a variable? Well, I always think of it as a placeholder or something that we're storing into memory so later we can access it and later manipulate the data as necessary. Sometimes I always have students picture this. Maybe a document that you see here on your screen has placeholders for a mass email, for example, and you don't want to manually type in there the first name of that individual when you see the dear and then the first name, because that is going to be a placeholder or a variable. We're running through a list of emails, or first names in this case here, that will be assigned that in the letter. So again, really neat way to kind of store something into memory and then later access that data for later on. So let's go ahead and get started with variables. We're going to be taking some notes inside Visual Studio Code so that way we can see several examples of storing and accessing these memory points. And then later on in other videos, we're going to show you exactly what are some data types that we can store in there. And so this is just going to be a general knowledge, and then we're going to do a more deeper dive into the data types. So let's go ahead and dive into the code here. So I have the file set up as the following. I have it in our Python folder, and then inside there I have the lessons folder, and then inside it I have variables.py. Now, I know this is our maybe third lesson if you're going in the order here, and yours may look a little bit different based upon the file structure. I try to keep mine just clean for these video presentations. So again, yours will probably be down towards the bottom because it's in alphabetical order. Just keep all of your lessons together. I'm going to have an individual lesson per module just to keep my video display cleaner for your visual pleasure. All right. So anyways, let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and collapse this here. And then we're going to talk about and add some notes in here about variables. So let's go ahead and get started with it. All right, so I have a few notes here on the screen. Feel free to go ahead and type them out as we're going through this. But variables, right? Why do we need variables? Now, we need variables because one of the first reasons that I'm going to put on here is for data storage. And that's where we see this number one here, data storage. And this allows us to store data inside the program for us to use and reference later. And a great example of this, and let me go ahead and put these notes on here as well. For data storage, variables are used to store data. And for example, we can store variable as opposed to writing them out. So I'm going to keep that on the screen. So now, an example here that we're going to do is let's do one without variables, and then we're going to include variables to show you the difference between them and how much more readable it will be when we use variables. So if I just do something like this, and I'm going to put our hashtag in here, and we're going to call this one without variables. We must use the raw values, right? And what do I mean by this? I'm going to do print, and I'm going to do, for example, 3.14 times 2 times 2. And so that's just going to simulate pi r squared, right? And our radius is 2. So if I were to go ahead and save that and run it, obviously we get the 12.56 over here. But what I really want to showcase to you is what if we were to store this in variables, right? And this is how we're going to write out variables. And we're going to talk a little bit later on in this discussion. What are some good ways to make variable names? So whenever we're trying to create a variable inside of Python, we want to first name the variable, then we want to provide an equal sign, and then we want to provide a value on the right-hand side. And so with that being said, let's take a look at how we can rewrite this to make it a little more readable and store information inside the variable. So let's first just do radius, and we're going to set that equal to Now, if I ever need to find out, hey, what is a certain value given here that we stored in a variable, I can simply print the radius. We can reference that inside the code. So let me go ahead and save that real quick. And then I'm going to clear this out by typing clear. And then now I can go ahead and hit the play button. And again, I get this right here too, which is what I would expect because I'm printing the radius here. Let's go ahead and add a few more variables to this. We want this to have pi. We're going to set that equal to 3.14. And then we're going to do a calculation, all right? And we're going to say area equals pi times the radius. And that's the same thing as pi r squared times radius. So down here, instead of printing the radius, I'm going to do this real quick. And then I'm going to do, just so we can see this inside of our terminal area. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, clear it out, and then I'm going to run this. So there it is right here. That's what we're looking for. Area is 2.56. And again, we're getting it from the variables that we created. Again, play around with this. What if you were to do 5? You can change the radius to 5, save it, and then we can run it again. And this time we get 78.5. Okay. So we just showed you that, hey, having a variable and storing it, and then here we're referencing it, and down here we're printing it. So we're kind of combining a lot of things that you have been learning in previous videos. All right, let's take a look at the second reason why we need to have variables. So code reusability. This enables us to write code that will work in different places inside of your script. And an example of this is, for example, we wanted to do circumference, but let's put some notes on here first. We're going to make this code reusability, variables that can store data reused again over and over throughout your code environment. And something that we're going to do is we're going to do circumference. And if you remember from math, circumference is pi times diameter. And let's see if we can do the following. This is what I would like you to do. Go ahead and pause the video once I give you this prompt here. So we're going to do the circumference of a circle, and that happens to be pi times diameter. Now, what I would like you to do is pause the video and see if you can go ahead and create a variable assignment for the diameter. And let's go ahead and set the diameter to 25. All right, so go ahead and pause the video. Don't go into the calculations quite yet. We're going to talk about that, but just see if you can create that. All right, well, hopefully you ended up creating that. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and come over here and we're going to do the following. We're going to say diameter is going to be 25. All right, now how are we going to print the circumference? Okay. Well, circumference is going to be pi times diameter. Now, the question that you have to ask yourself here is, why do I not have to put another pi down here with 3.14? Well, that's because we're already using it up here. It's already been defined from our previous example. So we don't have to redefine and assign it. It's going to stay the same, 3.14. So that way we can go ahead and use it again. If I'm going to print this out, we're going to do circumference, comma circumference. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And if I went ahead and ran this, notice that I do get the circumference of 78.5. So I didn't plan on this being the exact same number as the area up here, but let's just double check this. We'll do 30. We're going to save it, and then we're going to run it. And there we go. We got the circumference 94.2. So that is our reason number 2 that we have the variables. The next reason that we have is going to be code readability. And let's go ahead and learn a little bit more about it. So code readability, this is where variables are very descriptive in their names. It makes the code easier to read, not only for you as the original author, but for anybody that might be on your team that will take a look at your code, right? So whenever we're coming up with variable names, we want to make sure that they're clear, concise, they have purpose. We're going to be talking about creating variable names, some good naming conventions a little bit later on in this video. But for now, just to give you an idea with the code readability, let me go ahead and put these notes up here for you. That when it comes to multiple words in your variable names, because that can be descriptive, right? We want to add an underscore to them. For example, if I wanted to create a variable called number of apples, right? If I come over here and I do number of apples. Now, this is going to give us an error if we try to run this in Python. And it's because whenever we're coming up with variable names, there's going to be a little bit of rules associated with it. But before we get to that, in order to make multiple words variables, we're going to have to put an underscore in between each one of these to connect them in a snake case type of format, and that's exactly what it's called. So hopefully you picked up on some of these things that we've been doing so far. Variable names, they're typically lowercase, and they're going to have an underscore on them if they're going to contain multiple words in them for readability. So number of apples, we're going to set that to 10, and then we're going to do number of oranges, and we're going to set that to 5. What I would like you to do now, pause the video, go ahead and create a variable called total fruits. And then I want you to assign that to the number of apples plus the number of oranges. And then we're going to print that in our console. So go ahead and pause the video right now and create that new variable called total fruits. All right, well, hopefully that ended up working out well for you. Do something like this. We'll say total fruits equals the number of apples plus the number of oranges. So we're going to go ahead and save that, and then we need to print the total so we can see it in the console. So I'm going to go ahead and save that and run it, and we can see total fruits here is now 15. Perfect. That's exactly what we should see. All right. So variable naming conventions, we want to make with good variable names. I have a set of 4 rules that we can follow through with when it comes to naming your variables. And I'm going to tell you, it's one of the most difficult things that you might think is really easy to do, but sometimes it's hard because you're trying to make sure that the variable that you create is going to be descriptive enough and be useful enough for not only you when you come back and visit your code, but for others that might be on your team. So you're definitely going to want to take some of these rules that we're going to come up with here and use them in your everyday coding. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we come up with descriptive names, all right? And once I show you the descriptive names on these 2 variables here, you're probably going to see, without me putting comments on there, which one's good, which one's bad. But we want to make sure that we're giving useful and meaningful names that will describe the purpose of the variable. So with that here, I'm going to go add an extra space here. But we want descriptive names. I have this right here. It says total cost with an underscore, right? Underscore equals 100. That's good. Now we have this TC here. I really don't know what that is. Maybe if you created it, you know it, but another developer that comes in here has no clue what TC means. So again, you're not getting charged any extra money for utilizing descriptive variable names. It doesn't cost you anything. So go ahead and utilize it. Again, you see that we're utilizing some of the stuff that you already learned, which is we need to make sure that it's snake cased. So to a computer, TC is fine, but to a human, it's not fine. All right. It should be able to be read and understood what you're trying to get across. The next thing that we're going to talk about is in Python, we want to lowercase our letters. So there's not going to be an uppercase and lowercase, no camel case, no Pascal casing. It's going to be snake cased. So we want the lowercase letters to be utilized with underscores. Number of students. That is perfect, right? Number underscore of underscore students equals 30. That's good. Bad would be the naming convention that we just saw down on line 47, which happens to be Pascal casing, where the first letter is capitalized and then every other word is capitalized as well. So we want to make sure that it's lowercase. Now we also want to make sure that we avoid reserved words. And what do I mean by that? So far we've learned about the print statement, right? Well, guess what? You can't use print as a variable name, even though it might be a good one for you to think of, right? But you're going to have to avoid that word. So Python has reserved words that cannot be used as variable names. For example, the print statement. If I said print equals 10, I'm definitely going to get an error. So just things to keep in mind. As we're going through this course, you're going to learn what other key things are protected that we can't use, but the print statement is one that we've already visited. So I'll go ahead and put something in there that you already know. Now, the next thing is case sensitivity. Python is case sensitive. And what does that mean? If I come over here, give myself some room, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll up just a little bit. So Python is case sensitive. That means that the uppercase and lowercase letters are treated differently. Meaning that if I have something on my line 57 equals 100, as a human, I see line 58. I'm thinking to myself, well, total cost, that's the same, right? It shouldn't matter whether it's uppercase or lowercase. There shouldn't be a difference. But if I were to go ahead and run this, I'm definitely seeing total cost being 100, and that's because it's referencing the total cost, and the T and the C are lowercase, which references my line 57. So that's what I'm trying to get at when we're talking about case sensitivity. Case does matter, and that's something that is going to be a little bit hard for new students to learn and grasp, but just know that syntax does matter, case does matter when it comes to it. All right. So with that being said, there's a lot of things going on here in this lesson with variables. You're going to be utilizing it every single time that you program and reference. Variables are going to be all over. In the next couple sets of videos, we're going to be talking about the data types, what kind of data types can go into variables. But feel free to scroll down below this video. There's going to be some more examples of what I was talking about that you can just read over. And we'll see you in the next video. Till then.